to graduate. And right now, the way the policy is written, she wouldn't be eligible to graduate because she doesn't have verified credits. She also hasn't met all of the competencies because we just haven't been able to be in school to be able to do that. The state superintendent has given the superintendents in divisions authority to waive some of those requirements for graduation so that Niharika and her colleagues can graduate. But if I were to exercise that authority, it would be out of compliance with the school board's policy as it stands now. And then the last is that with the food provisions that we've been engaged in, so our staff has been handing out food. There has been a standing policy that usually it has come from the USDA that says that food can only be handed out to parents of students. And in many cases, our parents aren't able to get to the school because they might be working, holding their job, whatever it may be. And so they'll send the students to the school to pick up the meals that we put together. I'll just say it publicly, and if the USDA wants to haul me off, that's fine. But we were going ahead and giving the students the food anyway because we knew our families. But we were out of compliance with that by doing that. And we were just trying to exercise good judgment. So as good a judgment as we now have, the superintendent now has authority from the Virginia Department of Education to go ahead and give food to kids as opposed to their parents, but that's out of compliance with the school board policy. So I think the idea here, Mr. Chair, and correct me if I'm wrong, is to not go back and do first reading of each policy to ratify each one 2 weeks later again, and then just have to go back later to resolve those policies, but instead look at waiving those very specific policies that are associated with COVID-19. And then when we resume normal operations, go back to the policies as they stand. So I'll turn it back either over to you, Mr. Chair, or to Tricia Minson if she has some further comment.
Ms. Minson, if you have any further comments, we'd be happy to hear.
The only other item I'd like to add, I did speak with Elizabeth Ewing of the VSBA regarding this resolution today, and she had said there was one clause at the end where it says, be it resolved that the policies and provisions within the policies that need to be changed, and we needed to repeat that a second time at the end of the letter. So right now it appears in the first be it resolved, but the provisions within policies should also appear at the second be it resolved. But otherwise, it would be my recommendation that the board move forward with this resolution.
Thank you, Ms. Minson. Are there comments or questions, discussion about this resolution from any member? Ms. Downs.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. I just wanted to get some clarification towards the end, talking about further resolved. The superintendent is directed to inform the school board of any regulations that are suspended by the superintendent. So does that basically mean that Dr. Noonan just keeps us informed via Noonan's notes when he's making these decisions that might be counter to traditional school board policy?
Would you like me to answer that?
Yes, please go ahead, Dr. Noonan.
Okay. We would notify, and many of you have been notified about some of these issues already with respect to graduation verified credits and now with the food, but we would be pleased to inform you via Noonan's notes that just says, here's the scope of those policies that we're looking at that we would be out of compliance should this resolution not go forward.
Thank you.
And I would just add that, of course, if we needed to, we could certainly have a discussion about any particular provisions in a meeting, in a future meeting, if we were to go forward with this. Other comments or questions from anybody? Mr. Redinger.
Not on the substance of the resolution, which does make sense to me. A question for, I think, Ms. Minson on the process and procedure. Is it sufficient to waive these school board policies by resolution, or do we need to proceed under some emergency authority to proceed without a first and second reading and adopt what amounts to even a temporary policy without any prior readings and further analysis?
That's a good question. Based on the guidance from the Virginia School Board Association, I think the resolution is sufficient. The resolution is written so that it only suspends those policies and regulations where the statutory or regulatory requirements have also been waived by the governmental entity. So as soon as the United States Department of Education, the Virginia Department of Education imposes the same requirements that were there previously, we revert back to our other policies. But I do not believe that we need to have a first or second reading or any type of emergency order. I think that the resolution adoption by the board would be sufficient.
Thank you, Ms. Minson. Mr. Reitinger, okay with the answer, or okay? Any other comments or questions on this one? I have one that I'd like to ask, but I want to give everybody else a chance too. In the absence of any, I guess I will ask. Ms. Minson, the other alternative to passing this resolution would be to actually look for those policies that have been changed and for us to amend those policies. The difficulty with that is that then we have to sit down and go through that process for each one of those policies, whereas this resolution allows, in the situation where Dr. Noonan or you are working together, identify that there are just things that are no longer in alignment with each other. This resolution would give the authority to resolve that issue with Dr. Noonan then informing us of the changes that have to be made. Am I correct? It's basically we either go and do each one of those individually, or we can adopt this framework.
That is correct. Yes, sir.
Okay. Other comments or questions from members? Is there any questions about the substance of the text other than that one modification that Ms. Minson told us about, or the philosophy behind it? Okay, I'm not hearing any, so I don't know if anyone would like to make a motion at this point or not.
I'm not, Mr. Chair, were you going to do a motion tonight, or were we just going to have it sort of be there until next week and then take action on it next week?
I was going to actually suggest that question as I asked that question. There really seems like there's two ways to do this. One is we've been informed of it now. We can wait until next week if that's sufficient time, and I believe that is, if I'm understanding the situation correctly. And then we wouldn't. The motion I was wondering about is whether we needed to do a waiving of first reading or anything like that. It sounds like from your answer to Mr. Reitinger, now I think about it, we don't need to do that. So it sounds like there isn't an action to be taken tonight unless somebody wants to make a further comment. Mr. Reitinger.
I'd merely suggest, if we're all in accord and don't want additional time to think about it, it sounds like since we're in a meeting already, I'd be happy to make a motion to adopt the resolution, and so that we could proceed without having to do it. I mean, my big question, as you pointed out to Ms. Minson, was did we need to waive first and second reading? If the answer is no, I see no reason, if the school board is comfortable with the text of the resolution as written, as modified by Ms. Minson's suggestion, to proceed and adopt the resolution this evening.
Second.
Okay, so then that would mean we would be making a motion of some sort. Dr. Noonan, I'm looking to you to make sure that this would be not discomforting if we were to go along the lines that Mr. Reitinger just suggested.
It's not discomforting to me. I think it actually would be helpful to all of you, just in terms of efficiency, and it kind of puts us in a better position as we move forward with our planning with respect to those verified credits, graduation, and continuing to work through the delivery of food for our families. So we're good with tonight, I think, if that's okay with all of you.
Yeah, I think the original idea, and Dr. Noonan has reminded me of it without explicitly saying so, was that to have a little bit more time for deliberation. But if we don't need it, if people are comfortable with where we are, then I think we could just, I would be certainly willing to entertain a motion that Mr. Reitinger wants to put forward. So Mr. Reitinger, do you want to do that? And then if there needed to be discussion on your motion, we could do that.
Very well, Mr. Chair. I move that the Falls Church City School Board adopt resolution 3-20 as presented to it this evening, with the modification suggested by Ms. Minson.
Thank you, Mr. Reitinger. Is there a second?
Second.
I didn't catch who said that, but
Laura. I
Thank
said-
you, Ms. Downs. Appreciate it. Is there any discussion of this motion? All right, not seeing any. I think we can move to a vote at this point then, Ms. Goodell.
Yes, Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Ms. Dimick,
Yes.
Ms. Downs,
Yes.
Ms. Litton,
Yes.
Mr. Reitinger,
Yes.
Ms. Russell,
Yes.
and Mr. Webb.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion passes.
Thank you very much. And so with that, now we can move to 3.03 budget update, and Dr. Noonan.
Thank you. Thank you for taking action on that this evening. I think it'll be very helpful, and unexpectedly appreciate your movement there. So tonight, what we would like to do is Kristen and I are going to share the presentation. I'll do the first portion and she'll do the second portion, sharing where we are with respect to the budget. I know that there have been a lot of questions that have come up. I've shared some information with you in the Noonan's notes, and now we're starting to get a clearer picture. But I want to manage the expectation up front with everybody that we still don't have many of the pieces of the puzzle. We do have just a general sense of where we're going to be, and it's not where we were. So let me start with that as a context. I want to also start by thanking Wyatt Shields and Kieran Bawa. Both Wyatt and Kieran have come to the table in many ways as honest brokers of information, and have served as good partners, and we're very appreciative to them for their work. As I go into this, I do want to share just briefly what our approach has been. And our approach has been to really, one, sort of listen and learn. And part of the reason that we're having to listen and learn is because things have changed really dramatically from where we were just a month ago. We want to take the approach where we're going to try to minimally use in our budget process for FY21 year-end balance, because we know that year-end balance is considered one-time money, and anytime we use one-time money during the current budget or in the coming budget year, it can create a hole for the following year. And the last approach that we really want to take, and this is all obviously in absence of sharing information with you, is we want to really take the approach that whatever decisions we make, we are not in a position where we're having to do a reduction in force, where we're not having to tell people that they don't have jobs. We think this is a time right now where we're going to work diligently because jobs are at such a premium, that we want to try to preserve as best we can the systems that we have in place and the processes we have in place. So scooting to the next slide, we put together a very brief outline for you of what we are hopeful to be able to cover tonight. The first, and the way we've organized it is pre-COVID-19, and looking back for a minute at our advertised budget, looking at our summary of revenues and expenditures, city council guidance, state budget, and proposed in December. And we don't do that to certainly retread or to in any way bore you, but instead just remind you and the community more than anything where we were just a month ago. Second is we're going to talk a little bit about what the COVID-19 impact has been to both the general government, well, really all three: general government, state government, and our federal government. And then we want to talk about what our plans are and next steps for this current fiscal year that we're in, 2020, and the next fiscal year. So I really am hopeful tonight, as we're talking about this, that you can, as much as possible, sort of think about these in sort of two different ways. One is what's happening now and what we're looking at for next year. So let me start with the 2021 budget summary. Everybody here is very familiar, I think, with this with this chart. But you'll recall on the left-hand side of the revenue adjustments, that's where we were seeing some money come into our budget. So we were looking at the 2020 budget of 52 roughly 52 million. We were looking at state aid that was going up rather dramatically. Up about $960,000. We have federal dollars